Release the pressure, Jake.
They're like demons, Jess. You were inhuman.
What were they, Jake?
This is your home. You're dead. I'm not dead. What are you then? I'm alive.
You can't let these little motherfuckers out in the open. You waste them.
See, according to this, you're already dead.
I walk through the valley of evil. I shall fear no death. Cause I'm the meanest motherfucker in the valley.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each week, alongside our whatever...
We're killing it.
Yeah, do you know what, man? I say it every week, and every week I lose one piece of it. My brain just forgets it. But alongside our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon, we decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film now. Jesus, this is a free episode, okay? We got to try a little harder on this one. Yeah. You know, the patrons episodes were always just like, you know, whatever, we'll loosey-goosey the intro, fuck it.
Yeah.
But shit,
man.
There's
a little preview. There's a little preview of Patreon episodes.
Jesus. Well, Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout-out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for, maybe a year now.
Yeah.
Finally, yep. I believe there's 24. So yeah, probably a year. I believe there's 24 Patreon episodes waiting back there for you. So if you guys haven't made the jump to Patreon, there's like 48 films we've discussed that you guys haven't heard yet. So I'd highly recommend going and doing that.
Some gems on there.
We appreciate it. Gives us a little helping hand. And also, what's the other one again? iTunes, Spotify.
Yep, we're
Stitcher,
on YouTube now too.
YouTube.
Yep, I think we're on everything. Really.
Yeah, I actually have been checking the Spotify stats, and we got quite a few people listening over on Spotify. So that was clearly a good decision.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So wherever you're listening, though, if you've been enjoying the show, give us a good old rating and review, like on iTunes and such. It helps us find new listeners, and we really appreciate that. But that's the plugs for the week. 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you guys would have heard from us, free listeners, and we would have been talking Duel.
Yeah.
1971, early Spielberg, and also Breakdown, 1997, starring Kurt Russell.
In some beautiful khaki pants.
We had Hollywood Reporter, film critic, and friend of the show, Keith Ulick, on to talk to trucksploitation films. We had a lot of fun with that episode, and I mean, I was really glad to have been shown Breakdown at all. It's actually one of the few movies I hadn't even heard of that we talked about on the show, and I was surprised because clearly it was like actually a decently sized movie, maybe even a hit movie.
Incredibly overlooked and underrated film for sure.
Yeah,
definitely got to check it out.
So if you haven't heard that episode, that was just 2 weeks ago. So whatever podcast listener of choice, you can find it back there waiting for you. But 1 week ago would have been the last time patrons would have had the opportunity to hear from us, and we would have been talking some Arnold.
Oh yeah,
1982. We talked Conan the Barbarian, directed by John Milius, and the sort of cash grab sequel, Conan the Destroyer.
They went a little campier,
directed by Richard Flesher, which Jamie and I went into kind of at length. I think
I feel like we shit on it a little too much, but I think we were just so passionate about the first one.
Neither of us, because you hadn't seen either, right?
No.
Yeah, so neither of us had seen either film. We only knew them by reputation, and we were kind of shocked at how genuinely good Conan the Barbarian is.
Yeah,
it's
and how serious
film.
It took the story of Conan, which I didn't think was going to happen.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be more like Flash Gordon, kind of what they do with the sequel, really. So.
Yeah, well, and it was 2 hours and 15 minutes, and somehow it didn't. You didn't feel that length. In fact, I felt like I wanted to drink up more locations and more images from the film, and even Arnold is actually used to great effect as just his own look and body and physique. So I was quite impressed at almost how nearly painterly that film was, and then the second one was was kind of what I thought the first one
First
would
one's
be,
gonna be.
where it's more
And then-
campy, it's more
Yeah.
it's more just plot driven and sort of nonsensical in a way that's like not interesting.
Yeah, and it doesn't focus a lot on Conan. Actually,
No.
like I felt like I was more. Conan was along for the ride, while the princess's story was more at the forefront.
Yeah,
so.
and I mean, even if the princess's story was more interesting, you might
Yeah,
get it. But
exactly.
no one's story in that movie is interesting.
No,
so
not
it's just
really.
weird when like the rage of Conan the Barbarian when he's facing off against James Earl Jones, who's
Yeah.
just incredible in that first film.
Yeah.
It's really missing from that second one. But either
Definitely.
way, if you want to hear us get more in depth, I think we went for an hour and a half on those
Yeah.
two films somehow.
Yeah.
You can find that episode at patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. It was just last week's episode, so it's waiting for you.
Mm-hmm.
But this week, we're going guestless again. We're going the OG
Old school.
boys from just like our original couple episodes when we didn't have a guest, because I wanted to talk about a film that apparently a remake was supposed to be coming out possibly this week.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot that you told me there was a remake of this movie.
Yep.
Or coming out.
And
why, by the way?
they pushed the film back indefinitely. So
Oh.
I
So
don't
it's
know if it's
probably
coming.
not
I don't know
happening.
if it's coming out this year. Apparently they shot it or
Oh.
something. So
Do you know who the director was?
no clue. I can't even remember. I did
It's
look
just
it up,
such
but
a
it was
weird movie to remake, man. Like it's
Yeah.
such a unique movie itself. It's already has its own ideas. It's not like a franchise.
well,
thing,
and
so
it's
just
from
odd.
the year 1990. Like stuff from the
Yeah.
90s is not even
It's
remotely
not old.
dated yet.
Yeah, exactly. Like the technology, like you still kind of have that modern technology look and feel of things in the 90s. So
Yep.
it's odd. Like we have the Matrix and whatnot. So
Yeah, so it's just it's weird because it doesn't feel like we should be remaking 90s stuff yet.
Yeah.
And
yeah, like what are we gonna remake the Matrix? That it just seems
That's next.
That's what I'm saying. Like it's getting a little scary. Getting a little scary.
But the film that we're going to be talking about is Jacob's Ladder.
Yeah.
Directed by Adrian Lin.
so good.
Famous for doing the films in the 80s, such as sort of like erotic kind of thrillers, but also, I don't know necessarily I would say qualify Flashdance as that, but I would say Fatal Attraction, 1987 is
Okay.
definitely kind of like an erotic thriller. So that's what he got well known for. And then somehow he got gifted the screenplay for this, which is, I'll say, there's one scene that briefly attempts eroticism, and it's so horrifying that you can't actually, I wouldn't necessarily call it that.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll say that this is a very psychologically engaged film and less of
Yeah.
an erotic film in that sense.
Absolutely.
So either way, that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about the 1990 film Jacob's Ladder, a kind of psychological Vietnam horror film. And then we're going to be pairing it with a film that, because I hadn't seen Jacob's Ladder, so I wasn't really sure what to pair it with when I was going to do this, but one of my personal favorite and underrated Vietnam films that I think was similarly nightmarish and also psychological in its own way was Brian De Palma's Casualties of War. Obviously, I have a huge bias in what we talk about on the show because Brian De Palma is one of my just all-time favorite filmmakers. So.
And he's become one of mine now. For
Exactly,
Sure. Like,
yeah.
I mean,
See-
every movie, this guy hasn't gotten less than a 4-star film. So I mean,
We
it's
might.
just
This is
crazy.
just the Brian De Palma stand show. So
Yeah,
that's,
absolutely.
We figured anyway that we would, if we're going to talk about Jacob's Ladder, which is as far as Vietnam War films go, which was a huge genre that bursted out in the 1970s and through to the 80s. We're talking about Jacob's Ladder 1990, which kind of comes at the tail end, kind of the end of the Vietnam film being a profitable kind of film.
Yeah, which also I think might lead to why it does what it does, and kind of leads
Try
to
something new,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's almost talking on like what you think is PTSD and things like that.
It's interesting because you would think that Jacob's Ladder was kind of like not a very commercial film. Like it's a very depressing, very not like
Out there, a lot of dark imagery.
Yeah, well, and what's interesting also is that like this film and Casualties of War are kind of like the last what we know as the traditional Vietnam War films,
Sure.
and both tried to do things that were different from sort of like what those other films looked like. Like we're
Yeah.
talking like Platoon and Apocalypse Now and
Right.
things like that. These films tried in their very different ways to separate themselves from previous Vietnam films. And Brian De Palma was like, well, what if I just make the realism and disgust factor even higher?
Yeah.
And just make everyone completely uncomfortable and not have a good time at all.
Nope.
And so
yeah, there's not a lot of like, it's not like you're watching war films and you're going like,
I wanna have
kill
a
him, I
great
want all
time,
this.
yeah.
But there's just a little bit more to be entertained by, in the classical sense. Whereas
Both of
Casualties
these
of War
films-
gets really dark and very, very almost inhumane at times.
Yeah, well, both of these films I think go well together because they both have sort of nightmare depictions of Vietnam in ways that aren't similar to previous Vietnam films. Both of these films kind of want to...
They almost battle the interpersonal things of people.
They want to be almost endurance tests for the audience. How much can you suffer with these people?
Yeah.
And again, that they both do it in completely different ways and 1 year apart from each other is kind of amazing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about today. That's Jacob's Ladder and Casualties of War. And I think we're just going to jump right into it. We're going to talk Jacob's Ladder.
Sounds good.
Maybe the demons are real.
He's running 106 feet with...
This is barbaric.
I can get rid of the demons. Who are you? I can block the ladder.
Where are you taking me? Where am I?
Where do you want to go?
Home.
This is your home. You're dead.
I'm not dead.
What are you then?
I'm alive.
All right, we are talking Jacob's Ladder, the 1990 American psychological horror film directed by Adrian Lin. The film stars Tim Robbins as the titular Jacob Singer. He's a traumatized Vietnam War veteran who finds out that his post-war life is a little bit more fragmented and nightmarish than typical PTSD, and finds himself attacked by all kinds of demons and horned creatures and kind of suffers a Kafka-esque conspiracy thriller in the mix of it all. As he makes his journey between sort of reality and dream. And I would say that this is unlike any Vietnam War movie film previously. I mean, we've talked about Vietnam movies before on the show. We did one episode on them where we talked First Blood. Which was sort of a which was interesting because it was less of an action than it was Rambo as the slasher killer in that film, a man suffering from PTSD and coming home and finding that he doesn't have a place at home, but we paired that one also with Rolling Thunder, which was a very similar sort of story of a guy suffering from PTSD and kind of the more because I would say the thing about those films is that neither of them really, as much as I think both of them are excellent films about PTSD and specifically in how that relates to the American action film, both of them kind of being action movies in their own way, what they didn't do was kind of get into those characters' heads in a filmmaking style, which I would say Jacob's Ladder is the sole purpose for its existence.
Yeah,
is
it's
what
pretty
it kind
much
of seems.
what the film is kind of getting inside this Vietnam vet's head. And I mean, we'll get into what it is also doing, I think, as we go on, because it's also kind of alluding to like a heaven and hell and purgatory state and things like that. But I think what it presents with you at first is just kind of this like POV version almost of PTSD and like the psychological effects of what he himself is seeing, rather than like with the other movies we've watched, we kind of see them react to maybe what's going on in their head, but we don't see what exactly they see. Yeah. This time we're getting into the very depths of his brain, and we're seeing all the things that are kind of being personified, all his issues that are being personified in the world now. We see demon faces, we see a homeless guy with a tail. It's just weird shit that you can't explain.
There are moments in this of like actual Lynchian, like absurd horror. Like I'm thinking that like that nurse when her cap falls off and there's just like a tooth or whatever coming out of her head or something.
Like an alien root of some kind.
You're just like, what?
Exactly.
Why?
And so is Jacob.
Exactly. But I think it's kind of fascinating that the film kind of opens on what you would think would be the traditional Vietnam War film.
Where
like it kind of opens on on the scene that you would get, like the first real brutal scene that you would get in a film like that, where just their squad is ambushed and he's watching all of his friends get like brutally wounded, and the helicopters are flying, and you get the orange sky, you get the location, like this movie is traveling in images you've seen before. And what's interesting is that it presents this as a flashback, in which case you see all of these guys getting brutally murdered, and you assume that it's obviously by the Vietnamese, is what you just naturally assume, because that's what you've seen in all the other films. But then you start to see the guys kind of like convulse and like cough up blood and start like, you know, having like these really severe headaches and all of these things that don't seem like they're being shot at.
Right. Exactly.
Which kind of throws you off. And then you see Tim Robbins, who again would not be your typical actor you would see in a movie like this. You just see him get bayoneted in the gut.
Yeah.
And then bam, he's on the subway.
Right.
And you're just like, oh, he survived that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the film is like, did he?
Did he? We'll see. Well, yeah,
we'll see.
Come on this journey with us, and we'll see if he did. Exactly. Because then it's like, and what's interesting too is it doesn't really say like it doesn't wait to show you these psychological, you know, horrors that he's seeing. It's pretty much right as soon as he gets on the subway, right? Like he has his flashback, he wakes up on the subway, and then from then on...
Oh yeah, and by the way, he's
in a nightmare.
He's reading the book The Stranger by Camus, which is like, again, one of these kind of really like psychological isolated novels and stuff like that.
That's
so like,
and that's cool.
I mean, he looks at the sign on the subway and it just reads hell.
Yeah, which is, for me, it was just like, welcome. You know what I mean? Like, essentially, I think what this movie is, can we get into kind of like what it's really doing? Or
we should, because it's kind of hard to dance around it, because the film honestly acts a little bit like a bit of a Mobius strip in that sense of like, it's kind of like connected. It's all connected. It's one of those screenplays which sometimes I can find a little annoying because they can seem overtly constructed in that way. Like, they don't feel natural, because it's like every little detail you see has to have a purpose where it's all going to come back.
Because then when you watch it the second time, it's a different perspective. It's kind of like The Sixth Sense, you know. It's like the second time you watch it, you have the answers now, so you see things differently.
Yeah, exactly.
It's designed that way.
So like every moment so it's kind of hard to get into the details of this film without kind of talking about where this film eventually kind of gets to. Yeah. So I mean, maybe we should, but we should maybe jump into just what happens on the subway to him is that he basically just starts seeing demons right off the bat, and you're kind of like, what the fuck are these?
And what
demons?
I like that it starts too is it doesn't start off with like the blank demon face that they use a couple times in the film. It starts off with just this old woman that just is staring and just won't answer him. Doesn't. It's just a blank stare.
He's like, okay,
and he's just kind of like, all right. And then such a great detail is when he gets out of the train, and she just subtly stares at him right as they go off. And it's very subtle. There's not a lot to it. It's just it puts in this uneasy feeling inside you that you're like, what is going on?
It's that same kind of horror that we see a lot in, and we'll actually talk a little bit on next week's show, where you kind of see the people know something the main character doesn't know.
Yeah.
And it's like when you go into a community and the community knows something.
And it's like these people can't tell the character either.
Yeah. It reminded me of Wake and Fright in that same way. Like that kind of like, all of these people know something and they're all very overtly aware of the new guy who's just got here.
Yeah.
And as the film progresses, we come to understand that the reason that he's feeling that, and the reason that that's a thing, is because he is in a purgatory state.
Yeah, and it almost seems like the movie, because I was kind of battling with whether I saw it as if he was in hell or if he was in purgatory, because it would make, I guess, more sense that he's in purgatory because eventually it leads to him getting to heaven. But at the same time, it's almost like he had to battle his way. It seems like he goes from hell to heaven rather than just like a middle ground.
Well, yeah.
This place seems demonic. It does not seem positive or neutral. You know, it seems pretty evil.
Well, because it seems like there's two forces kind of fighting for, for him.
Okay, that's a
state.
good way of putting it.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that there are demons trying to pull him down, and there are other things, other memories, and other sort of kinder
trying to
spirits.
keep that hope intact and like keep him fighting and going.
And it makes sense when we get into, and which we'll get into a little bit later when we get into like the big climax reveals and how this is all supposed to make logistical sense. Because they do explain that it's called Jacob's ladder for a reason, that he is on the ladder and there are some things trying to pull him down.
Right.
And that the thing that put him down there in the first place, there's a reason he's already there. And then the rest of the movie is kind of watching him try and climb his way up it.
Right.
In these really sort of fragmented, nightmarish sequences that are edited where you're kind of getting the Vietnam sort of brutal ambush sequence at the same time as you're getting this sequence of him in a vague purgatory that seems kind of mixed with his memories, but also like an imagination of like he survived because he hasn't sort of accepted the fact that he's dead yet. Yeah. And then also mixed with like these more dreamy sort of reunions with his family that he had previously to going into Vietnam.
And that's part of the genius of the movie too, is kind of like how it plays with you, the audience member, because there's that sequence where
it kind of just drops you in. Like it doesn't explain any of this, and you like in the same way that it doesn't. Jacob is also very confused and disoriented by this experience, but the filmmaking also just drops you kind of like head first into it, and is just like, figure out what's happening here.
Right. And I thought a powerful scene where that is very apparent is when he sets it up so that you're with Jess quite a bit. And so you kind of get used to them and you're like, okay, they've got some chemistry, there's some love here, whatever. And then they have that part where he goes to sleep and he wakes up with Sarah, his ex-wife, who he has the kids with, and what you think is that it's going to be a flashback where it's like when he was with Sarah or whatever.
Yeah.
But instead, he talks about the fact that he's been having a dream where he's dating Jess. So this whole 45 minutes that you've seen already, he's now talking like it was just a dream, and now I'm with my real wife and my reality and my love.
Yeah.
And then, it has a great scene where it shows his family. He's talking to Macaulay Culkin, which is his son.
Yeah, which if you notice, he puts him to bed singing a song that he was also singing while he was delivering the mail when he's working at the post office with Jez.
Oh, right.
He's singing a song while he's in the truck delivering the mail, and then he later, in his further deep down dream, sings that song to Macaulay Culkin, his son Gabe, who died apparently supposedly before he went to Vietnam, but then there's also letters that he sent him while he was in Vietnam, so I was kind of confused. Like,
yeah,
but I don't think that the film is entirely meant to work like that, because it's weird because some of it is very clearly memory, but then a lot of it is clearly his own desires and imaginations infecting those memories.
And it's constantly on that fine line there.
So like maybe he just really wanted his son to still be alive, so he imagined that his son was sending him letters. And again, in his dream, or when you're talking about that scene where he goes even further down his dream and he wakes up next to his ex-wife.
Now I remember why. It wasn't because he slept. It was because he was having that fever and they put him in the cold ice.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
He was like he was going deeper into his brain,
down,
basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then when he's like, he has this moment of pure bliss, and you don't really get to see that throughout the film at all with this guy. And he's with his family, he's in this loving environment, and then all of a sudden they bring him back to life.
Yeah,
and
they bring him out of it.
It's this fantastic
shot of
his face, and he just looks like he is dead on the inside, and he wishes that he could just go back to that death. I guess because this reality, quote unquote. There's so many layers to this damn film, but this reality is now his like new hell. Yeah. And when before he had that moment, it was kind of his heaven. So it's like he just keeps getting punched in the face.
Yeah, because he's basically made up he survived his bayoneting in Vietnam, and he came home, and his wife left him because of some sort of strife to do with their dead child.
Yeah.
And he has since sparked up a relationship with his coworker at the time, his really hot coworker, Elizabeth Pena, who is actually awesome in the film as well.
Fantastic.
And The really interesting thing about that is when he wakes up and he's next to he's imagining that he's with his family again, and he says, "Man, I had this dream that I was with my hot coworker." So it's very clear that he liked her, sort of, but he was with his wife.
Exactly.
And now he's imagining that he's with her now that he has an ex-wife. So it's kind of like, did any of this happen in any capacity, or is it just? Again, there's a thing that happens to him that sort of activates his desires and his more primal behavior, and is that just he felt a lot of lust towards her, and therefore he's just imagining that he's with her now?
Are you also kind of saying, like, because we mentioned the letters or whatever?
Yeah.
Or you think that might even be something that he's almost creating, so that it's like there is reality and there is what's in his head, but he's kind of mixing it to a point where
it's just because if we're gonna, I mean, it's hard to dance around this whole thing. We should maybe just break down the entire structure so that we can really get into it. But the whole thing that happens is it's a big reveal in the film that he and his entire platoon, who we meet a little bit, some of the characters in when this film sort of transitions into a bit of a conspiracy thriller, where he's like, I'm not the only one suffering from these like Lynchian hallucinations, which the craziest one for me is that dance party one. Where you get to see the one Vietnam dude is there, and then he like shakes and hovers like David Lynch style, like in Twin Peaks, into Ving Rhames' body, the guy from Mission Impossible, who, funny enough, also a soldier in Casualties of War.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was like, damn, this guy just does Vietnam movies.
But then it's his body now. And then his head is shaking, so you can't see the face. And then it has a mask on it, and it's shaking. And then the mask is off, and it's shaking. And he's in the middle of this party that.
And then he sees like a random bird head in the fridge and stuff like that. Like
and
just real creepy shit.
Yeah, and then there's like crows flying around the party, and then he sees his girlfriend Jez dancing with another person in the party, and then all of a sudden she is getting fucked on the dance floor by a winged gremlin-looking demon motherfucker with a giant like lizard snake tail coming up and wrapping around her thighs and like coming between her legs.
Which also
and,
is what he sees on that homeless man at the beginning of the movie.
Yep.
So you're just kind of like, what are... And the thing is, too, the movie never really like explains what the symbolism really is.
No.
I think it's more just
these are just objects of hell, you assume.
Yeah.
Because later we do see some imagery that is sort of similar to this, and he's opening like books, like he's reading about hell. He's actually reading about... I don't know if you know, the idea of Jacob's ladder is actually a biblical thing. Like there actually is a ladder to heaven in the Bible in Genesis. Like that's the... That's where this is called... The guy who wrote the film is very, very religiously oriented.
Yeah.
So
I definitely got that. There's a lot of... Like, you know, they say things like, you know, it's like the chiropractor is essentially a guardian angel, and he says things like hallelujah and things like that. And like, they do a lot of...
All the names of the people are biblical. Jacob, Jezebel, his kids, Eli, and things like that. So it's just like... the film is very oriented in that way, but while he's suffering all these nightmare sequences, he meets up with his platoon, who the other survivors are also suffering these nightmare sequences. So they start kind of like, they hire a lawyer and they start trying to sort of sue the army to kind of figure out what happened here. And it's eventually discovered that a chemical engineer approaches him and tells him, we
fucked up, bro.
We experimented on you guys on this drug. I forget what the drug was actually called. I think they called it the ladder or something.
Yeah, it was something like that. Yeah.
That basically activated your most primal rage and just sort of like raw instincts and desires, and activated.
They even
that in
mentioned
you.
Like testing it on kids, and they just ripped each other apart. Or
and
something
monkeys.
Like that. Yep.
And then they said they tested it and they were going to try and use it on the soldiers to make them better fighters, and they slipped it into their food while they were all sitting around eating in that opening scene, and they all sort of hallucinated that they were being attacked, but they were actually attacking each other. And they were all brutally killing each other, which is obviously an overt...
His power doesn't have much use if you can't control it.
Yeah. It's very clearly an overt metaphor for what what this war did to the people, like the people at home
involved.
here. Yeah, exactly. Right. So all these people went in there and were completely confused and disoriented, and they were all all brutally murdered and don't understand what happened.
And seems like today we still barely know what the fuck happened.
So this whole film is Jacob kind of in a purgatory state where he has to sort of accept his own death, and that's the reason kind of he's seeing all of these things. He's seeing demons kind of trying to maybe pull him into hell, and he doesn't want to leave because he has a lot of unfinished business and a lot of guilt, and about his previous family that he's left at home, and he's kind of just imagined this weird world where he's come home and he's alive. And he's trying to wrestle with all of that, and it's not really working.
No,
it's not going great for Jacob for large portions of this film. There's demons trying to run him over with cars while they do weird fucking faces at him.
Just odd waves and shit.
There's a absolutely horrifying hospital sequence that
when it goes through all the corridors and we see like bodies piled up and
that
scene really felt like it was just going to like the darkest evils of his own brain. Like it was like the labyrinth of his mind in a way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's almost. It kicks off like with like Exorcist levels of like medical fear and paranoia, where like they first take him into the hospital.
Oh, and they have that needle sequence where it goes right in his forehead.
Yeah, which obviously makes no sense. Like that wouldn't work in any
not
capacity.
At all. So
not
it's bring health to one.
No,
oneself.
Well, no, and I don't even think that you could get through his skull with that. Like it doesn't make like he's having this weird thing where like he has a slip disc and he gets put into the hospital because these guys try to kidnap him in the car. Again, it's pretty insane how much this moves between like what is just a genuinely kind of like spiritual kind of like drama about like mortality.
So like a conspiracy thriller.
Like a conspiracy thriller where like guys are like kidnapping him off the street and being like, shut the fuck up, like don't talk about the chemical warfare. He's like, what the fuck? I don't even know what I'm talking about. And then how the chemicals have affected his brain and caused this very sort of like absurd existential horror.
Yeah.
And the way again that it just kind of shifts moment to moment from each one is kind of insane, because when he slips his disc from those guys trying to kidnap him, you assume that they're from the army. And then he gets taken to the hospital and you're like, oh, okay, like he's in a hospital, that's good. And then they're kind of dealing with him and they don't really know exactly, like how to fix him, because his chiropractor is like a specialist and has worked with him for so long, so he doesn't know how to explain that, like, hey, I would rather wait for the guy who knows me really well to work on my back.
Didn't they tell him that he's dead? Didn't they say that the chiropractor was dead?
I think they might have said that,
because they were. I mean, obviously, we all know now that it's almost like his own brain was, I guess, telling him that he was dead to because he's basically, this movie is an inner battle, but he gets told that the chiropractor's dead, so you assume that he has no other hope. Basically, it's like no other person knows his issues other than that guy. Yeah. So it's like the one thing that he kind of had is just been taken away, and now he's in this hospital that, it's full of people that want to kill him. And
well, it's just funny because when they first take him to the hospital, like it's a normal hospital set, right? But then all of a sudden they wheel him on his stretcher. Into like hell. Into like this like dilapidated wing that's like covered in rust and just completely disgusting. And as he's being pushed through it, there's all these like really bizarre, like sort of like mental patients in there. And then there's the wheels of his stretcher just start like running over limbs, like bloody limbs. And like you see sort of like these just deformed, like mutilated people. And it's
and then they even do a callback to the head guy, the guy that's spinning the head. It's almost like, I don't know what the symbolism was there. I don't know if you had like a thought on it or something. Well, but just to bring it up twice seemed significant to me.
Because in the opening scene, the people who are convulsing kind of look like that. They don't look like that to a cartoonish effect, but it's interesting because there's a very close-up shot of Ving Rhames who's like convulsing and he's coughing up blood and his head's shaking and freaking out. And then later you see his exact body doing the same thing, but again, his head is shaking in a more special effect kind of way.
Right.
In his dreams, because again, he's taking memories and he's almost applying them into this absurd dream world where all of this stuff is like more aggressively absurd and visual in ways that it previously wasn't. But that hospital sequence, from what I understand, went on to inspire Silent Hill.
Okay.
That
I could see that for
they
sure.
actually came up with the imagery for the first game based on some of that sequencing. Is
Oh,
what
that's
I read.
very
So,
cool. That's awesome. And I could definitely see that because that's basically what Silent Hill is. Like corridors, tight.
Like the
everything
guy,
is disgusting.
There's one guy who doesn't have like a mouth, and another guy who doesn't have eyes, and then they're I do the part where they're like performing on him, and they're just like. And he's screaming. He's like, "You can't do this to me! Like I'm alive!" And he's like, "Well, why are you here? You're dead, man." And he's like, "No."
It's so deliciously horrifying.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Tim Robbins is quite excellent in the film. I gotta confess.
What was he like at the time? Do you know what he was more known for? Because I thought you said that he wasn't exactly known for like these kind of thriller, psychological kind of movies.
Well, I'm gonna be honest. I haven't seen a lot of that kind of Tim Robbins like previous to this. Like I've seen him in Shawshank, and I've seen him in like High Fidelity, and like Mystic River by Clint Eastwood came out in early 2000s. Like I've seen him in quite a few things, but I'm not familiar with this period of Tim Robbins. But I just remarked in the sense of he's not really what you would assume as like as this kind of character.
Sure.
You know, he's not like De Niro. He's not like Stallone.
Yeah.
He's not like he's a little bit more boyish almost.
Like Michael Fox almost, like in Casualties of War.
A little, but even Michael Fox almost makes more sense. It's just
okay.
But like you would assume this role would be played kind of like by a more macho character, even like a Sean Penn or something like that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
And even for a PTSD film, usually like these guys are soulful and filled with so much pain and agony. And when you first meet Jacob, he's actually kind of like a pretty happy dude, like a nice dude.
Pretty normal
like
guy.
He's having sex with Elizabeth Pena, and you're like, nice.
Yeah,
and then
he seems happy about it.
Yeah, he's happy about it. And then he's cracking jokes and he's smiling. I mean, the young girls on the street are singing Postman to him, and he's having a good time.
Really, what sets him off?
But then the subway just fucks him up, man.
Yeah.
He tries to
and
exit
also,
that
I
subway.
think seeing that picture of his son, it's almost like that sparked something in his purgatory mindset where it was like, oh, and then like the hell started because
it was almost like purgatory tried to make him comfortable.
Yeah.
And then the demons tried to pull him out downward. And then he has this whole other sort of like this very strong emotional connection to, you know, his previous family, his ex-wife and it was 3 kids and down to 2.
And I think the doctor helps him like almost instill hope into him. Like when he goes to those meetings and gets the chiropractor done. It almost seems like because he always talks about, like he was talking about Sarah, he's like she still talks about you, you know, she still loves you, that kind of thing. And it's almost like the one thing in the movie that keeps him at least somewhat positive, because everything else is just kind of taking him down. So
and he has that great he kind of has a great line where he talks about the idea of hell wants to burn your life. That it wants to burn your memories. It wants to do this, and that you know maybe if you look at this from a different kind of angle, maybe that could be freeing to you and not necessarily like a punishment. Like if you just finish whatever business that you have left here, you could transcend. And you could. There's a nice way out of here.
Yeah.
If you think about it, if you stop and think about it for a second,
which is great. Like the guardian angel kind of has that line too, where it's like if you fight it, they're just gonna keep fighting you. They're just gonna keep tearing it down. But if you accept, just move forward and accept, then the angels will take you to heaven and all that.
And that was why I understood why he was so close to hell too, because you kind of brought that up at the beginning. Like you were like, it seems like he's more in hell than anything else.
Yeah, for me it was like hell to heaven rather than a middle ground.
And I think that's because that's where the ladder sent him.
Okay,
the drug, right?
Yeah.
Because he said that the whole point was that it takes you all the way to the very bottom, all the way to your base anger, all the way to like your sort of just like your most primal desires in every sense. So he kind of starts, and that's when he's bayoneted, right? When he's in that state. Yeah. So it's almost like he's already at the bottom when the movie starts. And he kind of he kind of slowly makes his way out, and all of these details kind of build up, like the recurring images of his son and the bike. I mean, did you see the shot of the bike that his son gets hit by a car while riding is actually in the dilapidated hospital?
Oh no, I don't think I noticed.
Yeah,
that.
so
No.
like there's all kinds of stuff like that happening in this movie
Yeah.
where like, you know, you can tell that this world is being constructed by his own psyche that has been
Yeah.
damaged both by the war and by like literal chemical warfare that's been committed against him by his
Yeah.
own country, and you know, a lot of his unfinished emotional business with his family and guilt and things like this, and again, you probably can't speak highly enough to the way that Adrian Lin really gets you into the headspace with the filmmaking.
Yeah.
Because as it cuts between, again, those three different kinds of stories that are happening and then the different tones of genre, it's kind of bizarre to watch.
Oh, it is. It's almost jarring at times, but it's not in a way that's not digestible.
No, and
you know?
I found it kind of rewarding. If anything,
Yeah, absolutely.
If anything, my only objection was that I kind of felt maybe it was a little too clean.
Sure.
That maybe like the fact that it all wraps up with like a little bow felt to me a little untruthful of specifically maybe just Vietnam stuff.
I would agree with that. I do think though what it was trying to do was more of like his personal story.
Yeah.
You know? So it's
That
like,
is what it's trying to do.
So I was like, as much as I do love a good, you know, crazy hard ending, that kind of thing, I did absolutely feel just very nice when he was with his son. His son tells him it's okay, and then they just they go up to heaven together. I'm like, you deserve that, man.
Well,
you fucking deserve that.
He walks him up the stairs of his old house and he takes him into the blinding white light. And then the white light is obviously the medical tent that he's in Vietnam, where we've shown that he got helicoptered, he got choppered out, and he died on the medical table there.
Yeah.
But they do have a great line where they look at him dead as they tried to save him, and they said, you know what, he looks kind of peaceful.
Yeah. It's
Like,
nice.
Yeah,
it is like
it's kind of a nice ending.
It
actually.
really is. Like, it's especially seeing him go through hell and then having this, and I love that they add too. He's like, he put up a hell of a fight. You know, it's just like, because then it kind of it puts that I guess you could say it's like puts that nice little bow with the rest of the metaphor, where it's like he put up a fight and you just watched him put up that fight.
Yeah, well,
so that was very
because
cool.
it's 2 hours of just like psychological anxiety and
Yeah.
torment, and
Exactly.
you're kind of like, Jesus
just
Christ.
so happy he got together with Macaulay Culkin.
And it all builds to one like last 10-second moment of relief at the end of the film.
Right.
And it actually reminds me a lot of David Lynch, one of my favorite films of his, Twin Peaks: The Return, which has a very similar kind of framework, which is the story of Laura Palmer and how horrifying her existence was, and that death is like the one relief, that she's like just a completely tormented, destroyed person through and through by everyone. She's been disappointed and hurt by everyone.
Yeah.
And then the one time you actually see her with like a non fake smile on her face is when like the light comes up and she's like, oh.
Yeah.
And it's a very similar kind of thing that happens here.
It's kind of even similar to like how Eraserhead ends. When you get that like one little glimpse of bliss at the end where he's like, I'm in heaven, or this light, you know, this bright light, but the rest of the movie is just an anxious, nerve-wracking, horrifying film.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we should enter the reductive rating round on this one. For me, this gets like a pretty high 4. I really I don't even know necessarily what's keeping me from the 5 on it. It might be that maybe I just have a bit of an allergic reaction to films that are just so overtly constructed like this, unless there's like a really, really, you know, overt purpose. Like I don't necessarily mind it. It's just it's kind of a case of like it's a very written film, if that makes sense. And I think that the filmmaking accentuates it and makes it all better, but it's just one of those cases where like every little thing has to like kind of like lock into place, and it's designed for that kind of like, we've taken you on this very, very manipulative ride, basically.
Sure.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That would just be the only thing I think that maybe doesn't have this film transcend for me in a way that like a 5 would. In like a way where I like really, really feel it, despite the fact that I think that this is pretty much strong in everything that it attempts to do.
Yeah, it really is.
So like, it's almost hard to even say that that's a knock against the film, because I don't know that I would change anything about this film the way that they do it. So I really dug it for basically every reason that we've said. I think it's strong as a conspiracy thriller. I think it's Lynchian horror, which I will say maybe if because I'm comparing so much to David Lynch. David Lynch is someone who's just so averse to giving you the answers that I was kind of shocked when this one hits its third act and it gives you all the answers.
Yeah,
where it just has a scene where a guy comes in and gives you the exposition answers on what happened and why this is all happening.
Yeah,
and I was kind of like, I don't know that that's necessary. I don't dislike it. I just don't know that it's really, really necessary to know flat out that chemical warfare was committed on these dudes, and that's the reason that all this psychological craziness is happening. Even though I don't think that it hurts the film in that way. It's just if I'm comparing to Lynch, that's the main distinction I would say between, if Lynch had made this film, we would have so many more questions
absolutely
about kind of what happened.
Absolutely.
But I do think that it when it goes from conspiracy thriller to horror to this kind of like spiritual drama about mortality, that it kind of does all three pretty damn well. So I was pretty happy with it through and through.
Yeah, I'm also gonna give it the 4. This is one that I could see getting the 5 upon maybe another rewatch or a couple. It's weird because it's like I agree with what you're saying. I totally see what you're saying. I think the reason it works for me with this movie is because it's such a personal ride for him. Like a lot of the movies that where they try to wrap it up all in the third act, it just seems because they needed to tie those plot points up. Whereas this one, it was almost like giving the lead character some bliss, some actual like happiness, and that really hit me hard.
Well, because one could even make the argument, if I was going to counterpoint my own argument, for example,
we're getting real deep here.
Well, because a lot of this is him kind of in that purgatory state, kind of blending memory and imagination. Like who's to say
what he thinks is reality and what?
Like who's to say he didn't make up the chemical thing? He didn't have a guy come up to him and explain away this thing so that he could move on, right? So it's just like like the movie doesn't. It leaves you with enough kind of like empty spaces for you to fill that like that's why I didn't really feel that it hurt the film that much for me in any way.
Yeah, I'm right there with you because most of the time doing that whole like here's just everything.
Here's the exposition dump where we explain all of this to you.
Most of the time I'm eye rolling. I'm just like, all right, let's wrap it up. Give me the finale, that kind of thing. But this one, I just felt like the character really deserved it. And so I was very satisfied with when they were giving me the answers this time around.
Yeah.
And that being said, the David Lynch imagery is unbelievable. I love the way that they use. It's very subtle. Like it's just like they'll just have little 2-second things. There's not a lot of heavy detailed shots on this weird stuff.
Yeah.
It's all stuff like in passing or in the background, and
it
just creates an environment that's very unsettling. I'm gonna give it the 4, and I could see this one getting the 5 eventually.
All right. Well, that will wrap it up for Jacob's Ladder. We're going to be right back, and we're going to be talking Casualties of War.
Yeah, De Palma, baby.
Woo. All right, we are back, and we are talking Casualties of War, the 1989 American war drama film directed by Brian De Palma, written by David Rabe, based on the very well-known New Yorker article that came out in 1969, which is just a piece of journalism that specifically addresses this as the very real story that it is. I actually went and
read... And it is, because I didn't get a chance to... me, I like the history of it.
Completely.
I didn't get a chance
completely true
Wow.
event. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
And I went and actually read the New Yorker article from 1969 before, because I had seen this movie a couple times, so I was like, maybe I'll do a little bit more research this time than I might usually, because I had just already seen the film. I only had to do a rewatch of it. And I read the article, and you would be pretty shocked at how close of an adaptation this is of the real article, just the article that was written. Like even the dialogue, Sean Penn's dialogue in the court scenes and stuff are ripped straight from the testimony, because it's an article of a guy interviewing the Michael J. Fox character.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I was kind of like, well, how did they get this story? Was it the Michael J. Fox character that wrote it, or was it like...
And all of the names have been changed in the article to protect everyone who's been involved and to protect him, because he's in like a kind of like military witness protection kind of thing.
Because I mean, well, we see Sean
why.
Penn give a little whisper at one point where you're like, oh shit, what could happen to this guy down the road?
Yeah, exactly. So the article itself doesn't use any of the real names of the people.
Okay.
And it's all based on testimony from the Michael J. Fox character, who the journalist interviews and kind of gives a bit, colors some of his own research that he's done into the events too, including the military documents and interviews with other people. But pretty closely, beat for beat, this film is a direct adaptation of that article.
That's unreal.
And the only thing that is really kind of changed up is the court stuff makes a little bit more of a prominent appearance in the article, whereas in the film it's kind of near the end of the film at that point when he does it. De Palma clearly wanted to kind of hash out the drama of the middle chapter of this film.
What I will say though, I do respect the fact that the time he takes still to do the court stuff and the after the event itself. Like it's not just like the event happens, there's 10 minutes of aftermath. Like almost the second half of this movie is kind of like the aftermath and Michael J. Fox dealing with
because you could see a version of this movie where the horror happens and then they have the white text that says these guys were sentenced to this. And
Exactly. You're like, thank God De Palma did it.
Yeah. Well, and what I find interesting when we're going to be comparing this to Jacob's Ladder is that I will say this has none of the dream factor of Jacob's Ladder.
Yeah, no.
It has none of
this
the
is
kind
very
of
real, very down to
It has none of
reality.
that kind of like hysteria that you would see of even other Vietnam films that would go kind of like more nightmarish and like the horror of it and all of this. Like this is more
just like on the ground. Like here it is.
Yeah, he takes like an angle that's just like subjective realism, like the emotional and psychological realism of the guy who was there watching all of this.
Right.
And then he just realistically depicts to you like an act so senseless and shocking that
and just like there's no reason at all.
Yeah.
They go out of their way to do it.
Yeah.
That's what's even fucking crazier.
So
about
he
it.
kind of just depicts the mundane details of how it happened, and it's almost more horrifying.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Because you're kind of
you don't need crazy symbolism for this darkness. Like this is just straight up evil shit.
Yeah, it's
what these soldiers were doing.
Yeah, and De Palma said the reason he was like really attracted to the story, and he was attracted to the story because he read it way before this got made, and it took a long time for this to get made because it was such an uncommercial version of this film.
Yeah,
because they were just saying like, either one, you're going to be depicting this kind of violence in a way that is deeply uncomfortable, and two, you're pinpointing the sort of the American crime version side of this. So there were two factors in this that led people to be like, this is going to be a very unpleasant film and it's going to make us look really bad.
Because it's not like one of those things where it's like there's no real gray area in this movie.
No.
It's like these guys were terrible. Like they're straight up what evil is. So it's really
Well, and it's fascinating, too, because De Palma got his career started. He was a very politically activated film student, and he dodged the Vietnam draft specifically because he didn't agree with it in any capacity.
Yeah.
And he didn't understand on any level why that happened, and he basically felt there was no moral justification or sense for it. And so when he saw this story, he was like, it expressed the Vietnam dilemma in a dramatic and terse form that made a lot of sense to me. That our involvement there is like this huge tragedy that absolutely makes no sense. And he said that it showed that we were over there basically fighting ourselves instead of any kind of enemy. That to the boys of that age, the whole world of this strange land must have been like being on a different planet where values can get turned upside down. Yeah. And it shows what happens when there seems to be no moral compass at all. The whole kind of irrationality that became the Vietnam War. So he's basically talking about the war as this irrational thing that people en masse just agreed to do this thing that didn't make sense, that was so violent and so horrifying.
Yeah.
And then he saw this story of a small group of people deciding to do something that's so irrational and so violent. And he was like, so you kind of saw it as a metaphor for, here's how a group of people can almost peer pressure each other into doing something we all know is wrong.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
he saw the Vietnam War as kind of like a larger way to get at that, which to me made it one of the more interesting films just about that war, because he saw the whole thing as he basically sees a very hyper specific event of the war and how it sort of is an allegory for the whole thing at large.
Okay.
And the way you get into it is very horrifying and very dramatic, and the way that he gets you into Michael J. Fox's very sort of passive witness character is horrifying.
Yeah.
I don't even know that I can think of another word. Like, it's so viscerally upsetting to watch this movie that I can't believe they bankrolled it to get it made, because obviously this was not the kind of film that you would get out of it and you would go tell your friends, oh man, have a great night at the movies and go check that one out.
This is a sit down and think
like it didn't
long and hard about the history of the world and the actions that we have done. Yeah.
Like it didn't at all surprise me when I found out that this ended up being a box office disappointment. And they greenlit it off the fact that Vietnam movies were really profitable at the time, like movies like Platoon and Full Metal Jacket.
To be honest,
were doing
I'm surprised
so much numbers.
they weren't still able to get asses in the seats, just because they'd have the trailer. They'd be like, oh, it's a Vietnam movie. These are good, you know.
Yeah.
So you'd figure that they'd be like, well, De Palma's doing it.
Michael J. Fox.
Yeah, Michael J. Fox.
Back
you know,
to the
Sean
Future.
Penn. So it's like, I mean, I could see this still getting asses in seats. It's just, is it maybe the way that they advertise it?
But also sometimes that's not enough, right? Something like
Sure.
you need weeks and weeks and weeks of people
Sure.
coming back, or telling other people, like
And also, I'm sure the reviews were kind of like, this is a hard watch.
yeah. Famously, I think it did okay in the reviews. Like, people
Sure.
were mostly positive on it.
Yeah.
But the main glowing reveal was from Pauline Kael, who was just like a #1 Brian De Palma champion, and nobody else really she was like, this is like one of the best Vietnam War films, and no one else really kind of like agreed with her.
Mm-hmm.
And De Palma was kind of like, I tried. There's a great segment in his documentary, the De Palma documentary, where he talks about this film, and he was kind of like, I really felt this movie. Like, he was basically like, I just really wanted to take a sobering look at this. I mean, this came out, I think, right after Body Double and The Untouchables.
Oh, wow.
And we talked about Body Double on the show already, which is perhaps his most like kind of tongue-in-cheek, like ironic film.
Yeah, and The Untouchables is like that's a pretty big blockbuster, isn't it? Like, people really enjoyed that one. It was a mass
I think
audience.
that was why he was able to get this one made, was off bankrolling off of such a huge
I
hit
just
like
made
that.
Untouchables. Now let me make my crazy Vietnam rape film.
Yeah, because like this is just one of his like really, really serious movies, I found.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Like he takes this material really, really seriously.
Even though there is a lot of like, good dialogue and entertaining moments. Like, Sean Penn, as evil as his character is, his acting is very entertaining, and he's kind of got this like, like New York thing or whatever he's doing. I wasn't quite sure, to be honest, but I really enjoyed the performances in this movie. That's for sure.
Oh yeah.
There's definitely some visceral entertainment in that regard.
Oh yeah,
it's just the story itself is just so hard to watch, and
I mean, especially as we get into the middle chapter of this film, which I mean, maybe we should actually get into the movie itself.
Yeah, sure.
I thought it was fascinating, comparing this again to Jacob's Ladder, that both of these movies open on the subway.
Yeah, yeah, and like waking up
up on the subway. And because it has Michael J. Fox, who he kind of is woken up on the subway. It's post Vietnam, and he kind of sees a young Asian woman who kind of awakens this flashback structure into the film.
Right.
Where he's going back, and it crossfades to his time in Vietnam, because again, De Palma can't think of any other story than a guy who just really wants to save a woman, Vertigo style. That's just how it is. It's just he sees
that's a lead male character.
Well, yeah. Again, he sees the image of a woman who reminds him of another woman who he failed. Right. Like, that's just like how it. It's just how it goes with him.
Yeah.
Even if it's a Vietnam movie, it's just how it's done. But it kind of shows J. Fox as Michael J. Fox, who plays it's as Private Erickson, and he's a new arrival. He's only been there like a week or two or whatever it is,
and clearly has like kind of like a naive feature to him. Like, everybody else you see, they're not really interacting with the locals or anything. Whereas he's like playing with the kids, he's taking food from them, and they're saying like, don't take the food, they might poison you or something, and and it's a weird line that you almost as an audience member have to balance, because you kind of understand what they're saying. Like, they're over there, and I mean, they are the, you know, quote unquote enemy of the American. Yeah. So they would see them as a possible threat and not to trust. And I'd kind of get that, just being like trying to be secure while you're over there. Yeah. But then at the same time, you know, you got Michael J. Fox, who's like, you know, these people are human beings, right? Yeah. You know, and then you're like, yeah, like you don't have to, you know, think of these people as these, you know, terrible enemies, combatants all the time. Yeah. Because clearly they are trying to just be friendly at certain moments in the film.
Yeah, like when the kids are handing them food and they don't even trust the kids. They're just they're like, there's going to be razor blades in that food. Yeah. And then they're yelling at the old man, and very clearly they just don't even understand what he's saying. Yeah. Like there's no communication here that is going to be helpful to any of them. Right.
Which was probably a big part of the disorientation of the war.
Fucking hire a translator, or like,
yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, how do you expect to help and assist these people? Because that is primarily what the mission statement was to go over there, because there was a really evil, you know, regime over there that was killing tons of people. But of course, they're not prepared. They don't understand the jungle, you know, and that kind of warfare. So things just get sporadic, and these people lose their minds, and they're also all on heroin. You know, there was a lot about the Vietnam War that's just like, regardless of what your mission statement was, it turned out pretty bad.
Well, and people making decisions at the top obviously can't, like, you know,
they're not there. They don't see the.
Yeah, so it's kind of like this.
And they're basing a lot of their strategies on what they knew about war already. The whole jungle warfare thing was a huge misstep for them, because they had no clue what they were doing there. You know. Yeah. They were used to the trenches. They were used to the, you know, that kind of thing. And now they're dealing with, you know, booby traps and tunnels underground and things like that. So
yeah, it's just, you know, like they had to put their, you know, they had to go there, you know, man. They just had to go. They had to go do something. Yeah. And it ended up just being like, well,
a shit show,
a complete atrocity for everyone involved. Yeah. And you're kind of just like, man.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's really interesting in the early scenes when they're just trying to kind of like live day to day. There's people who have been like, yeah, I'm used to this place. I've been here for like a month longer than you, or I've been here
and which is crazy too, because we'll get into it, but they use that as an excuse for why they would do such a terrible thing. Remember, John C. Reilly's character uses that in the courtroom as an excuse.
Young John C. Reilly, first, I believe it's his first movie.
Oh, really? Because I was like, damn, C. Reilly's looking fit. I've never seen you looking fit.
Yeah, it's pretty.
I'm used to his Will Ferrell days.
Yeah, so it's very interesting in the early scenes when you're just kind of seeing them all interact with each other and kind of get used to each other, and also not really understand what it is that they're supposed to be really doing, because the thing that's interesting about this is you never really see the enemy. You see one enemy in this entire film, really.
Yeah. They talk about it more than it actually happens, and they talk about it like they want it to happen. They're like, where are these? I'm not going to say the word, but where are these Asian people? Slur. Yeah. And it's almost as if they want them to attack so that they can start attacking. It's like they're so bored. That's
what they've, and it's funny because like that's what they've kind of sent them to do. So it's kind of like this thing where like
they're just like find enemies and shoot them.
Yeah, we've allowed them to do it, but at the same time, like we haven't really explained the purpose, because nobody really knows. Yeah, and nobody really exactly knows who exactly the enemy is on the ground. Yeah, and it's kind of it was a big problem.
And that's what's tough too, because it'd be like half the civilians would be on, you know, one side, and then the other half would be kind of with rooting for America, because there was the regime there, but once you're in it, how are you going to know?
Well, and then
it's a very disorienting
and then when the film gets into it, the Americans are obviously committing actual crimes against some people who aren't exactly, and then they're militarily activating people who maybe
wouldn't have done it. Right. Yeah, exactly. It's just an absolute shit show.
And that's what this film kind of depicts, is it shows you them taking someone who's completely innocent in this entire thing. Yeah. and you watch them get completely brutalized, and then you would understand why they would fight back against that.
Absolutely.
So then you're just kind of like, well, you're almost, then you're creating enemies.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it's even a bigger problem for you. But there's an awesome early scene where they're being ambushed in the jungle. And De Palma had to shoot this in Thailand, and he apparently like built jungle sets because he was kind of just like, well, the jungle kind of just like looks the same, like it's disorienting everybody. So they would just shoot a bit of jungle, then they would move the jungle set, and they would shoot some more to look like a different angle on all of this.
Okay.
And then he wanted that awesome shot where it kind of goes underneath the ground, kind of like
that was a great shot.
anthill style. Michael J. Fox gets stuck in one of the holes where he's about to get attacked, and you're like, it's this really suspenseful sequence where you think that he's going to get killed, and then Sean Penn, who actually is, for all intents and purposes, a good soldier.
Oh, for sure.
He's good at, and I mean, I think that's kind of what De Palma is getting at, is the people who would be good at doing the job are probably kind of have some deep-seated issues in the first place.
Just because it's rooted in violence itself.
Yeah, he's already unlocked a part of himself that would leave him, to make him good at killing, he would have to be already sort of damaged
and
in
something
a way.
I found interesting too is like every time, even Michael J. Fox's character does it, when they're shooting at the Vietnamese, they are constantly swearing at them. And it's almost like for me, it was like they were trying to almost dehumanize what they were shooting at so that they didn't feel like they were killing another human being. Because every time that they shoot, they just start swearing. They're like, fuck you. Ah! It's almost like they're trying to bring out the animal side in them so they don't feel it as much.
Yeah. No,
and that was pretty powerful.
Absolutely. Because when he kills that guy, they shoot the guy out of the tree in that sequence, and then the one guy comes out of the hole and he shoots that guy down. And Sean Penn is just like going ham. You're like, dude, he's dead, man, and he's still just like going and screaming and freaking out,
right?
Because he's already unlocked that primal part of himself, and then he's expected to, I guess, compartmentalize it somehow when he goes back into the barracks, and they're like, normal dude, what's up, dude?
Exactly.
And that's just what happens, is that they're kind of all sitting around and they're bored, and like they've been taught to dehumanize all of the locals in a way, and then they're sexually frustrated.
Yep.
And then they're told.
It wasn't even like, I think, and I actually forgot about this scene. There's a scene where they attempt to go into town in order to get quote unquote some R&R.
Yeah.
And
to hire some prostitutes,
and they're
in
not
town.
allowed.
Yeah.
Like, so I actually forgot about that, but it's like that one little thing sparked Sean Penn enough to be like, all right, well, we're kidnapping somebody and giving it the go.
Well,
like,
that's exactly what happens.
insane.
Is they all get really upset because they're already like pre-drinking and ready to go into town and go hire a prostitute, and then they get sent back to their barracks, and Sean Penn is shaving in the foreground of the shot, and it's a split diopter shot of all of them, kind of like all of the guys goofing around in the background, and you can basically watch on Sean Penn's face him making the decision that he's about to do it.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that scene too is like, because I think that's also the scene that happens after he's the commander. I can't remember. He gets shot. He gets like brutalized shot mid-sentence.
Yeah.
So then Sean Penn has this whole thing where his friend, and he was good friends with him, it seemed.
Yeah, he was the guy who had been there the longest with him.
Was brutalized in front of him while his arm was around him. And then he, he's denied the R&R. So this guy who all obviously has a violence inside him has now opened up this whole other part of him, it seems, where he's like, you know what, then I'm just gonna scorch earth, fuck the world, I'm gonna do what I want while I'm in Vietnam. And man, it's evil shit.
Yeah, and it's just awesome that you can see on his face that he's so... I almost forgot about the bit where his friend died, because he's obviously emotionally wounded
helps, like,
by
send
that.
him over the top
and
a little bit,
and then
too.
that, and then plus the fact that he's not going to get any pussy, like really just...
He's like, lost my best friend, not getting ass.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that you can see the guys in the background too, who are all kind of like goofing around, and they know. And then John C. Reilly's like, "Hey, the Sarge is here. What's going on, Sarge?"
Yeah.
And then he's like, "Well, we're gonna break up the boredom, and we're going to requisition ourselves a young girl from town." And some of them think that he's joking. Michael J. Fox thinks that he's joking. He's like,
Right.
he's joking, right? Like
Yeah.
he's
Like
he's
they can't possibly
he's
be
shooting the
talking
shit
about
or something, right?
kidnapping
Like,
a Vietnamese woman.
because yeah, I think he's addressing that idea that you kind of brought up, where they're kind of putting on like a macho animalistic performance
Right,
to
yeah.
like feel differently about it. He's like, he's just talking.
I
the
think
shit,
it helps
right?
with like being
Yeah.
in such a terrible circumstance. It's like, all right, well, I'm the man, you know, I'm macho. I'll play the part just so I can get through it.
Yeah, and he goes and he tries to tell another guy actually at the camp, and he's just he's like, yeah, but they were just like shooting the shit. Like, what did the other guys say? And he was like, oh, like he cracked a joke about it or something, and he's like, yeah, see, like they're it's
they're
fine.
joking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's just guys being dudes or whatever.
Although I will say, I don't know if that applies to this one, right? It's like, I have, for one, never been in a locker room.
No,
And was like, yeah, rape, right?
yeah, because the next scene that they go is they're getting sent on a mission the next morning. So the night before they're about to get sent out on their next mission, their next, they're hiking to the next outpost or whatever it is. They run into the town that they were kicked out of. They kidnap a young woman from her bed, pull her out of her mother's arms.
Yeah, I was gonna say from her like family too. Like it's like
yeah.
There's no humanity in this scene. It's just like we're taking her.
It couldn't be any more clear that she was just a regular civilian.
Oh yeah. And she looks young too. Like
She's
she
a
doesn't.
kid. She's living with her mom.
Yeah, like she's a teenager. It seems like.
Yeah.
Like they don't say the age, but
Yeah.
it seems like she's more like 15, 16, which makes it just keeps going worse and worse as the details move on.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just he kind of Michael J. Fox sort of, it immediately hits him that this is real, that this is what they're doing, and he's like, Jesus God. And in the background you can see them sort of like start pulling her out, and he's trying to like move away so that he can't see it, and the camera kind of dollies with him, but it dollies so that he could still see it in the background.
Yeah.
And it's like he can't escape what his crew is doing in the background. And they pull her out, and he's like in immediate like moral turmoil over this, because they're kidnapping and plotting to viciously rape an innocent civilian, someone who they're, as far as he knows, they're supposed to be protecting those people.
Right. And what's even crazier is that he's got to be sitting there just like, how am I the only one not cool with this?
Yeah.
You know, like he's with a crew. You'd think it'd be like one or two dudes fighting to do this.
Oh, well,
and then three would be like, you're insane. But instead he's the only guy, just the lone wolf going, guys, this is clearly terrible. Like, what are we doing?
And he there's a great moment where he looks over at John C. Reilly, and he's just like, did you think he was serious? Like, he was like, I thought he was joking. That's why I came here.
Yeah.
Like, did you come here because you think he was serious or because he was joking? And John C. Reilly just goes, he has like a bit of like a half unbelieved smile on his face where he goes, I don't know.
And that pretty
That's
much encapsulates his entire character.
Well, because
which is kind of like he doesn't make decisions for himself. He's just kind of told.
He's like the Sarge is doing it, so like clearly this is
That's
like
what we do.
This is like a thing that's okay.
It's crazy. Like
Yeah.
his character has almost no decision making skills at all. It's just whatever he's led to do.
Yeah.
He does without thinking.
Yeah, the only other person who has a sense of turmoil about it is the John Leguizamo's character,
Right.
Who is the first one who's like, I ain't raping nobody or whatever. It's like, you got to have my back, like on this, and Michael J's like, I got your back, but you got to have my back too, and that leads us to the tent, or the sort of hooch sequence, which is like sort of the middle sequence of the film that goes on for so long.
Yeah,
And
so uncomfortably long.
It's so uncomfortable, where one of the most brutal cinematic depictions of rape I think I've ever seen, where
and by doing it like subtly, like it's not like, it's not like I spit on your grave kind of shit, or like, they have like, it's almost the way he films it. He puts just one camera in front of the tent, and it just has like the three guys kind of talk while they're not doing what the other guy is doing.
Yeah. And the build up to it. I think it's almost worse because the build up to it is so long, because the Sean Penn character announces it so early on.
You just know it's coming.
And then and you see it slowly unfold, and you know. And then there's the big sequence where they break it down, where they're like, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And Michael J. Fox is like, no, like
No.
I'm not doing this. And Sean Penn obviously
Just threatens his life, basically.
yeah, well, he's like, what are you? He's like, are you a queer? Like, are you,
Yeah.
are you whatever? Are you this? Are you that? And he starts
Yeah.
like, in that sort of like macho way, trying to belittle him. And then he starts justifying it by saying, oh, well, she's a Viet Cong prisoner.
Yeah.
And I'm
He's
just
a VC.
Yeah, he's like,
Goddamn
I
VC.
got to interrogate her. That's a good impression, actually.
Thank you.
Sean Penn is pretty unhinged in this movie, just in general.
Completely.
And
Yeah.
I thought it was really funny. There's
It's like De Palma just let him do whatever the fuck he wanted.
well, the funniest thing, and I'm going to tell you because this is in the De
And it
Palma,
works.
in the De Palma documentary when he's interviewed about this movie, he said that he's very proud of the performances, and he said especially because Sean Penn and Michael J. Fox fucking hated each other.
It shows.
Yeah, and he was like, it was so great for the performances for the film that I
Hell
didn't
yeah.
want to even like bridge the gap. Like he was like, I was happy to have them.
I'm just curious. Do you know why they hated each other?
Well, Sean
just kind
Penn-
of like an ego thing.
because he said that Michael J. Fox was a TV actor, and he was like, Sean Penn, he's like, I'm a real actor, and apparently he hung out.
Sean Penn is pretentious as fuck.
And
so
Sean Penn hung out with all the other guys and kind of formed like sort of like a bro-y kind of
like we're movie actors. You were just in Back to the Future.
Yeah. So he kind of forms like a bit of a hostility towards Michael J. Fox, and apparently in one
Wow.
scene that they couldn't get it to work. It's the scene where later after the rape they try to murder Michael J. Fox Erickson.
Okay.
And
Is this deleted or did I miss?
No, did you? It's the one where they put the grenade into the bathroom.
Oh, right.
Yeah, they put the grenade into the bathroom.
I was thinking we were
to
still
try
in the
and kill
jungle.
him. No, this is after all of that. But
Yeah.
in the scene where after he gets almost killed by them, he runs in and he's just like, hey, I already told everyone about the fucking rape that you guys committed, that the horrifying crime that you did.
Yeah.
And nobody in this military fucking gives a shit. So like, you don't need to kill me. It's
Yeah,
fine.
so it's like,
and
congratulations, you assholes.
He
You're
takes a
scot-free.
shovel and he smashes Clark's face over it. And in this scene, they couldn't get it to work for some reason. He said the performances just weren't driving because Sean Penn's supposed to be kind of like taunting him, doing his stupid like open mouth face that he does where he's like, ooh, like or whatever.
Yeah.
And they couldn't get it to work. So Sean Penn, between takes, walked over to Michael J. Fox and clocked him, knocked him right over.
Oh my god!
And De Palma said that he thought Michael J. Fox was going to kill him. Like he thought that these
Like he
two
was
guys
gonna get up
He
and
thought that was the
fucking-
end of his movie. That these two people were going to kill each other and they weren't going to return to set.
like at least film it. At least film it, De Palma.
But Michael J. Fox agreed to one more take, and that was the take that they used. The one where right after he just got clocked by Sean Penn, where he's just looking at him with just complete hatred.
Yeah. Wow. Dude, that's amazing. Just because, like,
You
know,
feel it
I
in the
mean,
movie,
they're
yeah.
great actors, so I just assumed, this is good, some good acting. But I did honestly, like, subconsciously, I feel like I felt some hatred. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And for you to tell me that, it's just kind of a trip. It's very cool.
Well, yeah, and it really works in the scene where they're in that jungle scene where they're first confronting each other, and Sean Penn is giving his big speech about how this is a gun.
Yeah,
And this is a weapon. And
Yeah,
he's
point to
holding
his dick.
crotch.
Yeah.
There's some great, just like all timer deliveries from him in this movie where
Yeah.
he's just going nuts.
This is for killing. This is for fun. So good. So good. Love it.
And then what
I
follows?
could watch him do that character for hours.
Oh,
man.
yeah, and he's got the
So much to
tobacco
chew on.
in his mouth
Yeah,
and stuff
yeah,
like that.
so good.
And everyone just takes their turn raping the young girl while Michael J. Fox
Keeps guard.
Yeah, he walks out and just kind of lets them do it, and that kind of becomes the real horror of the movie. Is not just that Michael J. Fox. Because like it's kind of like what could he do? They confronted a little bit in the court scene, which apparently was a deleted scene from the film, actually.
And I mean, Sean Penn even does say, like, I'll kill you.
Yeah.
He basically, like, granted, he doesn't end up doing it and he doesn't kill him, but
Yeah.
there's that, I mean, when someone with a gun tells you, if you don't do this, I'm going to kill you, it's going to be in the back of your head, regardless of if they let you go or not.
Yeah,
so.
and that's just is De Palma shows you that he clearly is there's not much that he can do,
Yeah.
but he also doesn't let him off the hook for doing nothing. And he
Right.
shows you how horrifying it is, like his own inaction.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it apparently came from also De Palma's sense of inaction, that obviously he didn't go over there. He intentionally didn't go over there.
Right.
And he wasn't kind of being like, should I have gone over there and maybe become one of these guys? It was more of just a case of you're still complicit as a bystander. Like
Sure.
this stuff still happened
Yeah.
while you were
regardless
there.
of the fact you weren't a part of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's just like, is it directly your fault? Not really. But he also implicates.
But if more people were pushing against it, it'd probably help.
Yeah,
at the very least.
and at the same time, like you're still sort of like watching it, and again, in De Palma's always voyeuristic fashion, he doesn't look shy away from watching any of this stuff.
Yeah.
Where you get the split diopter shot of him, kind of like Michael J. Fox walking away, and you still have in focus the background where everything is about to happen, and then you have that shot where they're all outside the tent, and Michael J. Fox is standing out in the stormy rain, and this kind of like slow mo shots where he's just,
And he just has like that 1,000-mile stare at that
Yeah.
point where he's just like can't believe what he's had to process and do. Speaking of the I think, what was it called again? Diopter shots? Is that what
the
it's
split
called?
diopter shot.
He's got quite a few in this movie, by the way.
Awesome
and
ones, yeah.
and one of my absolute favorites. It was two shots that are back to back. It's one where it's Michael J. Fox is pointing his gun at the Vietnamese, and in the background you see the girl being stabbed by the
Oh,
guy.
yeah, 'cause that's
And
shortly
it's-
after
and it's
this rape
just,
scene.
It's such a crazy image that he only holds for about 2 or 3 seconds, and then it cuts to a first-person view of his aim sights.
Yep.
I just like I got so excited. I was like, film. You know what I mean? Like that little sequence of shots was just brilliant. I thought it was so powerful and
Yeah,
just
no,
well shot.
I actually have that in my notes too, because it takes
Yeah.
place right after this kind of like blue jungle scene where he sort
Yeah.
of distanced himself from the crime, but he still was completely impotent when it comes to actually stopping it in any kind of way.
Yeah.
And it immediately cuts to a scene where he's been forced to watch this basically unfold, where it cuts to them looking through the binoculars at who the people that they assume are more Viet Cong, and then they're terrified that they're going to get caught because the woman is coughing, like they've made her sick.
Right. And this is another scene that kind of shows like John C. Reilly's cowardice in his character, because like, you know, he's fine with doing the raping, he's fine with doing the kidnapping, and then the commander's like,
Kill her.
You kill her, and he's like,
She's gonna reveal
but I
our
don't
position,
want
like,
you,
kill
chief,
her
like
and
that
all
kind of
that,
guy.
yeah.
I'm like, like you're such a piece of shit in all regards. Like,
Yeah.
you just,
Well, and not to mention too, this takes place right after the scene where, because the morning after when they're all heading out, I think they're sort of observing the Vietnamese on the ground across from the river,
Right.
And then they send Michael J. Fox back because they're like, I need you to go grab some equipment or something, and send him back. And he goes back, and Clark is watching the house with the girl,
right,
And
and
Clark,
he's like, I want to kill them.
well,
so-
yeah, and Clark,
Yeah.
there's a close up of him sharpening his knife
right.
very ominously, and you're
Yeah.
like, ugh.
Maybe Michael J. Fox should switch you out. Like, yeah,
and
let's
he
not
does.
have
It's
him
Clark's
with the
like,
Vietnamese
hey, I can't
girl.
miss the fun. Like, the fun is obviously killing people.
Yeah.
So, and Michael J. Fox, and this is probably one of the most like emotional scenes in the film when Michael J. Fox
Because
tries
he has
to
to battle
approach
with
her.
himself now, not just with these other guys.
Well, yeah, and he has to approach her, and he approaches her, and it's the first time we get like a really good, clean look at her face,
Yeah.
completely beat up and brutalized,
Yeah.
and you get a good look at her eyes, and she is horrified at the sight of Michael J. Fox.
Yeah.
because she's just like, she doesn't know.
Yeah,
maybe he's going to be the next one.
She's just correlating American Soldier at this point.
Yeah, and
So-
his only response to her is just like, oh God. Like he
Yeah.
realizes what's happened, and he's
Yeah.
just like, I'm so sorry. Like he watched it, and it's not until right then that he realizes really what happened.
Right.
And
Yeah.
he all he can say is, I'm sorry that happened.
Yeah.
And then the Ennio Morricone score, by the way, I don't know if you know that he scored this, Morricone.
Oh,
the,
it's brilliant.
John Carpenter and Sergio Leone guy.
Oh, okay, yeah.
They actually used the Thing music as temp music for this film before they
Oh,
did it, because
really?
they knew that they wanted Morricone to do it. But the music goes up, and it's got like the flutes, the pan flutes and stuff in there too.
Yeah.
And it's a really horrifying moment where you see just the depth of Michael J. Fox's guilt at his own inaction, and then her, as she realizes that maybe this guy isn't gonna hurt her, but the automatic assumption that he was is still in her brain.
So she's still kind of like freaking out, and she's like doesn't quite know. She's taking everything very timidly. Something else that really got to me, just like trying to get into Michael J. Fox's mindset, is when he's going to be like, he's like, we're gonna get you out of here, whatever, and then he realizes like midway through that action that he's like, I'll be a deserter and they'll fucking kill me if I do that. Like, and not just these guys, but the military, like the American military, do not like deserters.
Well, yeah, because it's fascinating how
he has to battle that too.
Well, yeah, because both intertwined with his moral values is like his commitment to the military, who he assumed had moral values.
Yeah.
And,
or at least the basics, like the basic level of a moral
and that
value.
He has progressively learned that en masse those moral values are getting completely like shadowed and overrun by the fact that everyone is so disoriented and so completely confused. And it takes us back to the scene where they finally bring her up the hill, because he's like, I can't just let I can't go with her and take her home safely because I'll be a deserter and they'll kill me. So he takes her up the hill. And then they're just like, we got to kill her because she's going to reveal our position. And Michael J. Fox makes the decision to just start shooting them so that
they have to.
And then we're like, well, now she can't reveal our position because...
So there's no reason to kill her. Yeah.
Well, because then what's amazing is Sean Penn's like, you kill her. And Josh Riley's like, no. And then he's like, you kill her. John Leguizamo's like, no. And he keeps telling everyone to kill her. And in the background, Clark the whole time is like, I'll kill her. Fuck, dude, like, I'll kill her. I just sharpened my knife, dude. I'll kill her. Yeah. And they're like, no, I want him to kill her.
Which also leads to that whole thing with Sean Penn where it's like, it's not just about it's sick to say, but like his pleasure or anything. It's almost like he wants
it's a power thing too.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like he needs to control. Clark is willing to do it, but he's just like, no, I want this guy who doesn't want to do it to do it because I'm saying so and I'm in charge. And it's just like, oh man, it's a level of evil that...
Well, yeah, and that's what's amazing about those shots that you pointed out, too, is that when Michael J. Fox starts engaging with them, with the Vietnamese below, by shooting at them and being like, there, she can't reveal our position now. We're already revealed.
Yeah.
So
There's no reason
that's
to kill
that.
her.
There's no reason to kill her anymore. And then while he's engaged in that fighting and not paying attention... In the background, with a split diopter shot, she is just getting completely stabbed 2 or 3 different times. It's almost like a predatory slasher kill in a movie.
Yeah.
Like if you see the split diopter shot like that. It's horrifying. It's like a brief moment of like actual horror filmmaking gets in there.
For literally 5 seconds.
And Michael J. Fox doesn't see it happening. Like we see it happening. Again, this is Brian De Palma, again, implicating the audience in a way where you're like, you get to watch all of this. Have fun.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't war grand?
Yeah, so in his own kind of sick way, he's I think De Palma thinks that he's doing her justice by forcing you to watch her story.
Yeah. That's a cool read,
and I think that was kind of his intent with it. And I mean, it's obviously it's hard to watch, and a lot of people were made really uncomfortable and sick by it, but it's kind of like...
And what's crazy too is it leads eventually to like everybody but Michael, of course, having to kill her anyway.
Yeah,
because they all end up shooting her.
Yeah,
so it's almost like that whole
slow-mo bit where she's walking across the bridge, and and he uses the bridge almost like this like stage.
Yeah,
where you get to like watch her run across it, and everyone just gets to see everything that they've done to this person.
Yeah.
And then they all just completely gun her down and drop her body down below, and they try to just forget that they did it. And Michael J. Fox, obviously having just seen it all, can't just simply do that. And then that's what kind of turns the back half of the film into the pressures of, and I'm really glad that he did keep all of this stuff in, where he's where like this is where we get to see Ving Rhames. Ving Rhames is who's sort of even higher up than a sergeant, some sort of lieutenant or something, tells him that like, hey, look, man, shit happens.
Yeah, he's like, why try and buck the system?
Yeah, well, because he has this great story where he talks about how his pregnant wife was denied service at a hospital based on her race, and that he freaked the fuck out and flipped shit out and got put in jail because of it. And he was like, my anger and my response was righteous, but he was like, it didn't really end up accomplishing much of anything.
Right.
So like, why even try to do that really?
Yeah.
And it's like his argument makes sense, but it's in that same bureaucratic way that like, then why try anything? Like, why try to make anything better?
Yeah.
Like, it's definitely a save face kind of argument.
And then it even leads to him saying, like, you can't expect anything different in the combat zone.
Yeah.
So it's almost like he sets up a thing where you kind of understand it. You're like, I do get what you're saying here, like how he's going about it. But then he even kind of destroys even that part by saying that you can't expect anything different in a combat zone. It's like, well, yeah, I can actually.
Then it's like, why you
gunfire?
even have a combat
I expect
zone?
in a combat zone. Rape and murder, I don't. So it's like you know that kind of whole excuse for it. It's just like we're in this environment. It's like, guys, it's not enough.
Yeah, well, I mean, and as soon as you start, you know, the movie kind of does depict how quickly you can make an excuse for this kind of behavior.
Yeah, like when he starts talking to the real like head chief.
That there's legal violence and illegal violence, and in war that just kind of blurs together, and they're just like, that's just something we got to accept. And it's like, well,
I don't think we.
If you're supposed to be
War
the better
crimes.
people,
Yeah,
man, like
exactly.
It's just like, you know, so it really does show you.
Like, there's still rules for war. You know, it's like you can say all's fair or whatever, but it's just like
and then it becomes an excuse to
there's
do
a
whatever
reason
you
there
want.
are things called war crimes.
It becomes an excuse to brutalize people and then use the violent response from those people to continue brutalizing them.
It's just a never-ending cycle of violence.
Yeah.
And that's just what you're going to end up with.
Yeah. So it's... And then, the back half of the movie just kind of turns into him both fighting the fact that all of the guys know that he knows what they did and that he's trying to rat them out, and the fact that all of the different army members, as he climbs the ranks to go up and tell them what happened and get them in trouble, nobody gives a shit. Everyone's just like, we got bigger problems here than this. And he's just like, yeah, but like, the people on the ground are doing this, and like they're not carrying out the mission.
It's clearly wrong. Yeah, exactly. It's like, guys, it's not even a part of your mission statement. Why would you be okay with this?
Well, yeah, and then he freaks out.
It's not helping your mission.
And he tells Michael J. Fox, this sort of thing could cause an international incident.
Yeah,
and it's just like, is the war itself not a little bit of an international incident at this point?
It's like we're far gone. We're far past that.
Like, we're in an international incident at the moment.
Back home, they're already protesting the war and shit. I mean, the whole there's a crisis already. You know, it's like, I don't think shedding some light on some craziness would. I mean, yeah, it'd probably make it a little worse, but at the same time, it's a disgusting war crime. Yeah, you should be open about these things.
And the way that De Palma, when she falls down and she dies too, and the way that it pans over all the other bodies in the water too, both bodies that they just shot, and also Americans who just got shot and killed there too. So it's kind of just like he's associating this with, like, you know, a larger sense of, when you justify violence, there's like a really, really weird mindset you have to enter to do that, and that mindset is very, very easily corruptible to do other things. So it's just, you know, and the way that he dramatizes that in the filmmaking is really compelling to watch and really upsetting to watch at the same time.
And then another thing, when he's saying, he's like, well, he saved your life and now you're gonna ruin his. And you're just like, well, dude,
what about her life, man?
The Vietnamese girl that he not only ruined but took away?
Yeah, and the one guy's so concerned that he's going to go above the lieutenant's head to the next guy, and he's like, you're going to violate the chain of command? And they were like, they violated more things than the chain of command. Like, again, they're more worried about like these bureaucratic rules that clearly have been bent to allow more things than was supposed to be there, and it all culminates in a larger sort of courtroom drama where finally,
which is the most, somehow I found it almost to be like the most uncomfortable scene in the whole thing.
It's also really upsetting because the most
to watch John C. Reilly like have this almost, because he seems like a total moron that just kind of goes with the flow, and it seems like that moment was his first real realization of what ridiculously evil thing he just did. Yep. And he's like trying to justify it to them, and he's just like, well, they told me to do it, and like, like it's just it's almost like he's trying to justify it to himself, and he's only now having to deal with it, and it's pretty pretty hard to watch.
Yeah, well, because
Even though he's a piece of shit.
it really gets you into the mindset of, you know, this kind of groupthink that happened
Right,
among them,
exactly.
right? Of where like they
Just makes you feel uneasy.
they all justified this psychologically in a way so that
Yeah.
they weren't the bad guys, and then
And
all of a
now
sudden
when
they're on
they're-
court for being the bad guys.
so
They're
when you're
like, wait, what?
explaining-
I don't
you're kinda
understand.
like,
I
you're
followed
not-
the chain of command. Like it just
Right.
makes sense, right?
Right. And so now you're watching them like actually have this epiphany of what they've done. Besides Sean Penn, I think Sean Penn knew exactly what the fuck.
Oh,
I mean, they
Sean-
all knew what they were doing. That's not what I'm saying.
Sean Penn's dialogue in the courtroom scene is ripped straight from the article, and it's amazing the justifications that he pulled out. Where he doesn't even talk about the rape; he just talks about the murder, and she's just like, "Well, she was gonna give up our position."
Yeah.
And then he's like, "Why did you even have her with you to give up your
it's like,
position?"
it's like, dude, do you not remember why she was with you in the first place?
Yeah.
It's like, dude.
Yeah. But one of the
unbelievable.
most fascinating bits I thought, and what's funny is De Palma talks about that they did a pre-screen test of this movie to talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
and they asked him to cut a couple things. So the version we watched, I think, was the extended one that included all the footage.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I definitely watched the
one of
extended.
the bits that they cut because it made people uncomfortable was the part where the lawyers grill Michael J. Fox on his inaction.
Oh, that was one of my favorite moments of the film. It was like, you're not
Michael
even letting
J. Fox
this guy
is forced to
off of
wrestle
it.
as he's just like, why didn't you fucking shoot them then? And he's
Yeah.
just like,
I should have shot them.
fuck, I guess I should have shot them.
Yeah.
Like, shit, dude. Like,
Yeah, and to have that was powerful, definitely.
yeah, to include that stuff is like really, really brutal at the end of that. And all that we're really left with at the end of the film is we come back to the subway sequence where he's come back and he's looked at he's looking at this young girl and he kind of follows her off the subway because she left behind her scarf, and he returns her scarf to her, which is a really symbolic moment because when they kidnap the young Vietnamese girl, the mom hands the scarf to the young girl. That's the thing. That's the
right.
thing that they're stopping the mom from while they're taking her daughter, and they take the scarf and give it to the young girl. So he's returning it to her because again, it's that Hitchcock thing where he's seeing the image of a girl.
Yeah.
And it's bringing up all of these feelings.
I also love that he
in
has
him
to
and
end
stuff.
it on this kind of like sweet note and do the doesn't she say something like it was just a bad dream?
Yeah,
It's over now?
because she says, "Do I remind you of someone or something?" Yeah, she says something.
It's
along
like
those
it's
lines.
corny, but in the best way. You know what I mean?
Well, see, and what's funny is just like I like if you were, I think your bad dream is over or whatever
Yeah,
it is.
I found it endearing.
Yeah, and what's kind of funny about it though is that like he kind of does have a small moment of relief there in the same way that like Jacob gets a
Yeah.
moment of relief at the end, but at the same time you're kind of sitting there and you're being like you're kind of left to still think about it
Well,
overall.
that's the thing. Like the girl is like saying, it's over. Like
It's
you
over
know,
for
you,
like
you
for-
kind of.
yeah.
It's like it's over, and you should be able to. You
Yeah.
should forgive yourself. Like Michael
Yeah.
J. Fox's character should forgive himself.
Yeah.
But to say that it's like he'll never have to deal with that kind of knowledge ever
Yeah.
again, probably not. That's probably something he's gonna. It's probably gonna pop into his head at least once a week for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, but still, I thought the ending was nice, and I don't know if it's a De Palma thing, but it felt like a De Palma, very De Palma-esque.
Well, because he was the one who ended up putting that one in. I think the screenwriter was a little upset because he wanted like something, he didn't want that
more
note in the movie.
courtroom ending.
He wanted more courtroom stuff, and he
Yeah.
wanted more of like a thorny kind of ending on it. And what's funny is that it's just weird because like I read that as a moment as relief, but
Me too,
I
yeah.
didn't read it as like oh, it's over, or like it's been solved, or like it's like
Oh,
anything
sure.
has been like finished. Like for me, I was still like Michael J. Fox had that vision because he saw one woman, and I'm like, I think he's gonna have it again the next time he sees a woman. Like
Yeah.
I really don't like.
That's a good point. But I do think like, do you think that like I don't know if Brian De Palma thought like the way he executed it, it
Oh,
did
yeah.
kind of come off as like Michael J. Fox can
little
move
bit.
on from now.
Yeah.
But I like your read on it.
It
for
was
sure. I
It
like
was
that.
definitely supposed to be considered like a bookend.
a little more of a wrap up.
a little bit
Yeah.
more of like a bookend.
But I
of
do like what you're saying there because it's true. It's like if one Vietnamese woman.
Well, because I was gonna say when you look at the film as a present day thing, it's him waking up having the worst nightmare of his life, where he's reliving the worst thing he's ever
that's
seen.
ever happened to
Yeah,
him. Yeah.
and then at the end he's just like, okay.
I'm gonna go to the park now.
Yeah. And as far as I know, this guy has been forced to live in kind of like basically like a witness protection style thing, basically.
Because
ever
the
since.
guys that are released by now, by the way, some of them who got sentenced, like Sean Penn's character got sentenced 10 years.
Yeah, well, and some
10 years.
and some of them didn't even end up serving the full time. Some of them ended up disputing the case, and some of them ended up doing all kinds of things.
Crazy.
Like after.
That was almost like the most devastating part of it, though, to watch all of them get their sentences. I'm like, yeah, you deserve that.
Yeah,
you deserve that.
Clark got
gets life.
Yeah.
And but then Sean Penn gets 10 years. And you're like, 10 years? You're not even going to get 25?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
fuck you, justice system.
Yeah.
You know, it's like Sean
Yeah.
Penn is the mastermind behind this terrible shit.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Well, I think that might wrap it up for Casualties of War here. This one gets, I mean, obviously a pretty high 4 for me. I mean,
Yeah.
for me, it's honestly pretty close to the 5, just because I'm so.
Yeah.
I mean, I've watched a lot of Vietnam stuff, and this stuff is, despite the fact that it's like weirdly enough the least dreamy and like sort of like crazy image oriented. Like it's not like Apocalypse Now in that kind of way either. It's the most like sort of like grounded and realistic
here's the
version of this
story,
one
in a way.
And for some
Yeah.
reason, it's the one that I end up always thinking about the most. Like it's the one that gives my brain the most to chew on. Just how it depicts both the sort of like macho groupthink that kind of happens, and also how it gets into larger crimes and war crimes and the Vietnam War in general,
and how like we like sweep things under the rug, just to keep
things moving
a little bit, exactly,
grease
just
the
to keep
wheels a
things
little
moving,
bit and stuff like that. Yeah, so for basically all the moments that are all the stuff that we've already talked about, like I was pretty compelled by this one, and I almost a lot of time don't recommend it to people because like it's a really upsetting watch.
It's a tough watch.
It's
very good, but it's gonna get into.
I will say other Brian De Palma films have more rewatchability for me because they're not as upsetting as this. But I also think that the value of this film is how distressed it makes you.
Yeah.
And how unflinching it is with this like really powerful material and this horrifying story that I bet you some people wouldn't even believe.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to believe while you're watching it that people would do this stuff, but then it
was one of those things where they claimed it was a true story. I was like, I'll have to look into this because this is one of the most evil things I've ever fucking seen.
All of these people were sentenced, and basically the movie plays out the same way. So it's pretty nuts.
Nuts. I'm also gonna give it the 4. This was pretty close to the 5 for me too. So who knows? Maybe on a rewatch. But yeah, De Palma. I was expecting De Palma to get a little more dreamy and a little bit more abstract or whatever.
Yeah, well,
but
see,
it's just such a grounded story.
It seems like he toned it down for the story. It's one of the most like sober, serious movies out of him probably that he's ever done.
Yeah, for sure.
Like he's never done another movie that quite feels like this one does.
Yeah, because you got Body Doubles, Scarface, you got all these like crazy over the top character movies with sporadic action and whatever, and then this one is just really just telling a brutal story of groupthink and kind of. When you're in a dire, terrible situation, I guess even worse things can pop into your brain and lead you to do these things. I mean, obviously, Michael J. Fox was the voice of reason in this movie, and fucking thank God, because everyone else is a total piece
and what's
of
interesting
garbage.
is that at the beginning, too, we talked about it, that he kind of paints a picture of how these guys end up making these decisions in the first place, too, right?
Yeah.
Like this frustration.
It's all based on frustration, really.
and how they've been basically told and commanded to unlock this part of themselves, and then also been told to just put it away when it comes time for outside of war times.
Yeah, and also I think it shows kind of the dangers of the thought of the chains of command.
Yeah,
where it's just kind of like, well, this guy's in charge, so even if it's a terribly evil act that is obviously questionable, well, I got to do it because he's in charge, and that's how you get Nazi Germany. So.
Yep.
So it's an incredibly powerful movie, and for those that are going to watch it, just be warned that it's a tough one. It's a tough watch, but it's well worth it.
All right. Well, I think that'll wrap it up for this week's episode. That was Jacob's Ladder and Casualties of War.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks so much, as always, for listening, guys. We're going to be back in 1 week's time for patrons, and we're going to be talking werewolf movies.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking An American Werewolf in London, 80... Something
Yeah,
like that?
81. I want to say 81.
Written and directed by John Landis. And then we're also going to be talking about a film directly referenced in that film, which I didn't know because I was watching American Werewolf for the first time. We had a chance to see it on the big screen, so we couldn't pass it up. The Curse of the Werewolf.
Yeah.
19
With Oliver Reed.
1961, starring Oliver Reed, sort of.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get it. We'll get into that
on next week's episode.
I was a little disappointed with the lack of Reed, but we'll get there.
In the bits that he was there.
We'll get into it.
Yeah. So that's what you can expect. Again, that's at patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast for anyone who wants to listen to that. But in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be back with another free episode on your podcast listener of choice. And we're going to be having a guest on, and we're going to be talking video game zombie movies. Bending the rules a little bit here, talking a little bit of the early 2000s. But we did at some point really want to talk about Uwe Boll on this show. And unfortunately, he's a bit of a modern director here. So we're going to be talking House of the Dead, 2003.
Oh, yeah.
But we're also going to be pairing it with Paul W.S. Anderson's Resident Evil.
Yeah.
So 2 video game zombie adaptation films.
Looking forward to rewatching these just because, I mean, Resident Evil, I'm going to give more of a chance this time around.
Yeah.
I did have a sour taste in my mouth with the video game and all that.
Yeah.
But for House of the Dead,
I've
think
never
I might
seen it,
just
so-
be like so entertained by it that
you think
we'll
you
see
would,
what
yeah.
happens. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
We'll see how
I'm
it
excited
goes.
though.
Yeah. Have you seen it? I've never seen it, so.
House of the Dead.
Yeah.
I have seen it, but it was when I was young. Like it
Oh,
was
okay.
one of those like 12. Like I'm over at a friend's house and their parents let us watch R-rated movies. That kind of thing.
Right.
So.
Well, either way, that's what you can expect in 2 weeks' time. As always, thanks for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy.